Okay, we'll get this thing started, even though if we have some late arrivals, they can show up, but let's go ahead and get started. This is a special call meeting of the Commissioners Court of Hood County, Texas, on Thursday, November 12th, 2020, at 11 a.m. in the Central Jury Room of the Hood County Justice Center, 1200 West Pearl Street, Granbury, Texas. And this is an open meeting workshop, and on the agenda, we're going to review and discuss results of the salary compensation study and staffing study conducted by Evergreen Solutions, LLC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our expert.
All right, good morning, everyone. I know you're all behind me, but I'm going to be looking ahead so I can see the screen, but I'll try to turn it down. Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
That's better.
All right. So I'm going to be facing ahead of me since that's where the PowerPoint is, but I am aware that you are all behind me. So if you have any questions, feel free to just get my attention. I'm not offended by that.
I'll watch for them back there in case they do.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Angel Yazbek. I'm one of the consultants. I was working on both the compensation and the staffing studies. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and go through the results of the compensation study, go over any questions related to that, and then I will jump over to the staffing study portion. So without further ado, so just to give you an overview of this part of the meeting, I'm going to give you an overview, refresher on the study process, as well as go through our findings from the employee outreach from when myself and Project Director Nancy Berkeley came out to Hood County and spoke to the employees back in February. I'm also going to go through our assessment of current conditions, which I'll explain in a little bit later on, as well as the compensation philosophy of the county, the classification review or the job title review, as well as the compensation review that's specifically regarding salary. I'll also unveil the new recommended pay plan, and just a brief overview of implementation methods, although not in great detail since we have some budget concerns this year. So in terms of the tasks that have been completed, we have done most everything related to the study, including conducting employee outreach, which involved a visit to the county back in February. We also assessed the conditions of the current pay system. So that was just determining where employee salaries fell in relation to the pay ranges.
Morning.
We also reviewed the county's current compensation philosophy as well as desired compensation philosophy moving forward. And then we also asked employees to participate in a job assessment tool, or JAT. And using that input, we conducted what's known as an internal equity analysis, in which we were determining the duties and responsibilities associated with various positions. Then we conducted an external equity analysis where we sent a salary survey to various municipalities, other counties, to assess what their salary ranges were for various positions. And that helped us determine the competitiveness of the salary ranges and current pay. Then from that, we developed a new pay plan to be more competitive with the market, as well as individually assigned various classifications to the appropriate pay grade and pay range based on our assessment of the internal equity from the JAT, as well as the external equity from the salary survey. And then we were developing some appropriate methods for implementing the new pay plan, not for this budget year, obviously, but perhaps for the future budget cycle. And with that, there were some estimated annualized costs, although that's not going to be the focus of today's session. We have provided a final report, as well as a training and study methodology to the human resources team. And then the only remaining task we would have for this one is to discuss revising job descriptions moving forward. So when we went out to Hood County back in February, we solicited some feedback from supervisors and senior leaders in terms of what's kind of working well at Hood County in relation to compensation and what could be improved. So we found that overall, Hood County employees find their jobs to be very rewarding, and they appreciate the short commute from their homes to their workplace. However, there was concern expressed among supervisors and senior leaders that individual salaries and pay ranges should be more competitive with other counties. And they've also expressed concern of compression of salaries over time. So this can refer to new hires making close to the same as those who have been at the county for a longer period of time. That's one way to look at compression. And then when we're talking about classification, it was expressed that some titles could be revised to better reflect the duties and responsibilities associated with various positions. So that was something else that we were considering in this study. So early on, this was again back in February 2020 with the previous pay scales, we did assess the various step plans that were administered by the county for various classifications. And we noticed that in some cases, the same classification was assigned to different pay grades. This is not really a common practice that we have observed, and we did develop some recommendations to address that concern moving forward. But what we did find was when we were assessing employees' salaries in relation to the midpoint of their salary range, which is step 7 for the step plan, we found that 69.7% of employees' salaries were below that midpoint. Now, the reason we focus on that midpoint is that employees who are at that midpoint of any kind of pay range should be performing proficiently and satisfactorily. They're considered to be very proficient employees. So if we have a lot of employee salaries that are below that midpoint, there could be some concern that either you have a whole bunch of new hires or that employee salaries are not progressing as expected. So that's something that we took into consideration when developing our recommendations. Next, we were reviewing the county's compensation philosophy and desires for compensation moving forward. So when we were assessing the market position for where salary ranges should be, the county expressed that it would like to be competitive at the average of the market, which is pretty typical. The county also expressed that they would like to have equitable and flexible pay practices, which led to the pay plan design of open range. So previously, and currently I should say, the county administers a step plan where you have, say, steps 1 through 11, and there's a clear progression from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. An open range is similar where you still have a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum, but salaries are free to fall anywhere within that range. And I'll show you an example of what that pay plan looks like later in the slides as we did develop a proposed open range plan. So moving forward with how the county would like to increase pay, the county expressed that it would like to continue with across-the-board increases of, for example, cost of living adjustment, as well as some performance-based or merit-based increases. Next, we looked at the classification review. So we reviewed the employees' input of the JATs, as well as the supervisor review of the JATs. Now, this also plays a role in the staffing study, but I'll discuss that more when we discuss that particular study. But essentially, after reviewing the JATs, we utilized a compensable factor scoring methodology to determine the internal hierarchy or ranking of classifications within the county, both within departments and across departments. And then also when we were reviewing the duties and responsibilities, we made appropriate changes to the classification system. And those are explained in a little bit more detail in the final report provided to the court. So next we did a compensation review, which was part of our external equity analysis. You'll see up on the screen, marked in red, were the peers that contributed data for the study. So there were 13 public sector peers that contributed salary ranges for 54 benchmark classifications. Now you'll notice that doesn't include each and every single classification in the county, but it is a representative cross-section of classifications across the organization, across all the departments and the salary grades. The average number of matches for each classification was 6.0, which is a good representation. And it's important to note that not all peers had exact matches for all benchmark classifications. But we still, again, with an average match of 6 per position, is a really good representation. So combining our recommendations from the job assessment tool as well as the external market survey, we developed some recommendations for improving upon the compensation system moving forward. So one is proposing a new pay plan, which is an open range structure with 22 pay grades and range spreads of 55%. And when I pull up the pay plan, I'll explain that in a little more detail since I know words are a little abstract. And then we did individually slot classifications utilizing both the market data that we found as well as respecting the internal hierarchy at the organization to make sure that pay grades were assigned to the classifications appropriately. So up there is the proposed pay plan. And you'll see what I mean by there is a minimum, midpoint, and maximum, but otherwise salaries are free to fall anywhere between the minimum and the maximum depending on your pay grade. And then when you see the range spread of 55%, what that means is that the difference between the minimum and the maximum for any particular pay grade is 55%. So that is what we pulled from the market. This is what we found was consistent with the peers, and that's why we picked that range spread percentage. Now, there were multiple different implementation options that were developed and proposed to the county, including options that were addressing the salary compression, as I mentioned before with our assessment of current conditions, where we had 69.7% of employee salaries below the midpoint. We developed options to try to decompress that a little bit more. However, as a result of COVID-19 and the budget cycle, implementation is currently on hold, but certainly up for discussion. And that is the end of this presentation. Are there any questions or anything that you want me to go back over?
This is just part of the staffing that you just did there, right? Did you get we went into both?
We did both, sir.
Okay.
I'll cover the staffing in the next presentation.
Oh, okay. Oh, very good.
Questions?
Speak a little fast for this country boy here. Now, getting to the staffing is really what I want to look at too.
Yes, sir.
I did have a question. On the comparative counties, some of those were in black and some of them were red.
Yes, sir.
Did we not get information from the ones that were black? Is that what that?
Yep, so the ones in black means we didn't get information, so specifically we're asking for salary ranges, so if we could not acquire that information or they didn't give it to us, they were in black.
I don't know. For James's sake.
Yeah.
Bruce is not here, but I thought,
Departments fall there in that basin.
but I thought that Commissioner Eagle was supposed to be here. I don't know why he's not here, but I know James.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you have, what position, like where would a deputy fall in that pay scale?
EOS.
Oh, yeah, so it's not
Bruce
included in the
said he wasn't gonna be here.
presentation,
I don't know why, but-
full deputies to be, et cetera, and pay scale. Off the top of my head, sorry, I can't remember which pay grade they were assigned to, but they were assigned to them.
And we do have that report?
Yes, the court has it.
Okay.
Other questions?
I think some of the questions that some of the people have here today are going to really be centered around pay. Is there any way we can see that so that we know what questions to ask? Or is there any way that we can see a handout or paperwork that shows what the other counties were, what their pay scales look like compared to ours? Is that something that's in the report, or is that something we'll have access to?
Yes, after the presentation, and of course, there won't be any action taken,
Okay.
but yes, that will be available.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. That's in the report, isn't it?
Yes, it's in the report that you received.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I'll clarify. In the report, it's the averages of what we collected from all of the peers.
Right.
So I didn't present it on the slides because that's really gnarly to read through. It would have ended up being small prints, but it is in the report.
Just so they know, and they do identify the number of representatives they use for each category. So that out of that whole list, not everybody responded, but they are shown in the report that I guess everybody's going to get, or,
That's correct. In the report, you will see that the number of counties, cities, whatever, responded to the questionnaire.
right.
And it's not easy getting results like that in good times. And then
Yeah.
when you have an area that maybe half of the staff is not working, it's even more difficult to get that information. I know when I get those requests, I don't enjoy completing that information. So I know how difficult it is to get that information from other counties.
I think to answer the question, it did come out as an average of 6.0 responses, even though we didn't get 6 in every category. Some got more, some got less, but it came out as an average of all of those lists of counties that were in your presentation. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. And to speak more to the patrol deputies and sergeants, those would definitely be classifications where just about everyone would have a patrol deputy and sergeant. So I think for them, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think if my memory serves, there was definitely more than 6 matches for those positions.
Did the study just address salary compensation, or did it address benefit packages also in the study? Because all of the, is it strictly salary only?
Yes, sir, it's strictly salary.
Although you had some responses as you interviewed people that it was agreed that the compensation package was pretty good for Hood County. Did I see that in the report?
Absolutely. The benefits package was definitely appreciated
Right,
and certainly competitive.
right.
Well, in fact, isn't Hood County's benefit package probably better than any of the surrounding counties? Compare Hood counties?
We did not compare it in this study.
And when you say benefit, are you talking like medical, dental, and vision? or
Retirement.
Retirement?
Retirement.
And our retirement is one of the top as far as counties go in the state of Texas. We do a maximum contribution for the employee, and then the county also does the maximum contribution per employee. So yes, as far as our retirement, top notch. There is no question about it.
You really can't get any higher than our
You
retirement.
cannot, not through TCDRS, you cannot. We have the top notch package.
Okay. Okay, why don't we go on to the next phase?
Okay. We ready for staffing then?
Sure.
All right. So next I'm going to dive into the staffing study. So we actually conducted this study concurrently with the salary survey because, as Melissa mentioned, it can be difficult to obtain data from peers. So at the same time that we were collecting the salary information, we were also collecting staffing data. So just as a brief agenda here, I'm going to go through the study process as well as more details about our internal staffing analysis, which refers to the analysis within the county. And then I'm going to talk about the external staffing analysis, which includes what the peers had, and then just some brief findings and recommendations based on what we found. Whoops. Okay. So as I mentioned during the compensation portion, we had employees complete a job assessment tool, and we had supervisors review them. So that was useful not only for the compensation portion to ensure that employees were being compensated fairly for their duties and responsibilities, but also helped us get a bigger picture of, within their respective departments across the county, what do employees provide for the county. And then we also conducted department head interviews to validate our findings from the JAT, internal staffing analysis, and obtain feedback for preliminary external staffing analysis. What we had done was we collected some data from surrounding peers, presented it to the department heads, and asked for additional things to consider to help refine that analysis. Which ties into the last point of conducting that external analysis by surveying the market, comparing comparable staff members in the county's departments. So for the internal portion, again, that included reviewing the job assessment tools, and then also determining the classification duties and responsibilities within as well as across departments. So seeing what each classification was contributing in terms of services. And then again, we also interviewed department heads to provide their own insight to the services within their respective departments. So this include their perceptions of employee workload compared to peer counties, and also which services are consolidated versus specialized in other counties. So for instance, a lot of times in larger counties, we find that they kind of have the luxury of being a little bit more specialized in what they offer. Whereas with smaller counties, they have to be a little more concentrated, kind of the jack of all trades, so that might be more consolidated. Which then ties into the extent to which employees may be more specialized in their work and to what extent they may be cross-trained to take care of everything that that department is responsible for providing to its citizens. So then we conducted an external staffing analysis, and in that table you will see all the peers that contributed staffing data. So in this one, we included all the county's classifications because, again, this was staffing. We wanted to compare all of the county's classification counts to compare to the classification counts at other counties. So the peers were provided a brief job description to assist with the matching process. And again, not all peers had exact matches for each classification. So for instance, they may generally have clerks, they may have more specialized clerks, so we really wanted to pay attention and made sure that the matches that we made were as close as possible. So in the report, which has been made available to the court, these tables were drawn from Exhibit D, but this one shows the staffing levels by department. That does not include elected officials, that just includes maybe appointed department heads as well as clerical staff and other staff. And just to kind of give you an overview without kind of grilling you too much, if we compare the second column and the fourth column, overall we find that the numbers, if we looked at an overall average, are pretty comparable with Hood County compared to its peer counties. However, there are individual counties where Hood County perhaps has a few more staff and others where Hood County has less staff. So that's just another example up there. So while we might see these disparities, that doesn't necessarily mean that a department is overstaffed or understaffed. It's important to consider, are the services being offered adequate for its citizens and general population? So that's just the last table of that exhibit, but I'll go ahead and jump into our findings and recommendations, which ties into what I was just saying. So overall, if we looked at just the overall average, the staffing levels align with those of peer organizations, but that does not negate the need to continuously review staffing needs to make sure that each department, so for example, the road operations department is able to provide the services that are needed, county court of law, et cetera, making sure that each department has enough staff to administer the needs. Which leads into the second finding where some departments may have higher numbers and others may have lower numbers. It could be that the county does in fact need just a few more staff to address the needs in various courts, and that is okay. And it may be in the future that perhaps less staff is needed because the demand is naturally different. It's just important to continue to assess that with each budget year and with each passing year, as well as technologies and policies and regulations change, just to make sure that the county is staying on par with its staffing. So questions on that one?
So for comparison, say Johnson County and Hood County. Johnson County, I'm not, don't quote me on numbers, but for Johnson County, they may have 8 law enforcement entities within that county, different police departments and stuff like that. So the sheriff's office is taking less calls, less demand. However, in Hood County, we've got pretty much 2 law enforcement entities that take criminal activity. So how does that come into play with those numbers? Just looking at, taking pieces of the pie and kind of split up more over there versus just here when those numbers look like we're well staffed within the sheriff's department, but yet you're taking a lot more stuff than where they're at.
So that one has kind of a multifold answer, so bear with me as I kind of dissect different portions of it. So part of that, there's a reason that we surveyed multiple counties. So like you mentioned, Parker County, Johnson County, those are going to be a bit more dynamic with the number of stations they may have to field those calls. Whereas maybe Somerville, Erath, they're a little bit smaller, maybe have a similar number of stations, but Hood County yields more calls. So by surveying multiple entities, we kind of average in all those factors. And as I mentioned, with this one, we're kind of working with what we are told. It's hard to say, we're going to break down by exact, detailed second-by-second numbers how much staff is needed, which is why in my recommendations, I say, it's important that while the overall numbers may say it's good, it's still important to take a look at kind of that day by day, continue to assess the department, and see if, in fact, more staff may be needed in a future budget cycle. Welcome. Other questions? Melissa, anything to add or anything I forgot to mention?
I do not. The only thing I wanted to add, and it's kind of just leading off of Lieutenant Barry, those were the type of things that we did discuss when Evergreen and I sat in on phone interviews with each department. And the department heads made it known to us what additional duties they may have that other peers may not have, just like Lieutenant Barry was saying. And so that was taken into consideration. And I know Evergreen did listen to each department head based off of what duties they stated their department did. They also took that into consideration when they processed this report. So they did hear from each department head about their departmental duties. So I just wanted to let you know that that was done and those things were considered for each department.
Well, I guess it's just like John was saying there. In Johnson County, they got what, other 9 municipalities that have police force. Here in Hood County, we only have one municipality that has a police force, and that's Granbury, where the sheriff's office has got to cover the entire area of the county, other than the city limits of Granbury, although y'all do cover and assist the Granbury police within the city limits of Granbury as well. Am I right about that, Sheriff?
Yeah, that's correct. This county is way more unique and different than any other county in the state of Texas. And so the population out of the county is way bigger than most of the other counties that have the cities that take care of themselves, and the county is more rural than anything, but that's not the case in Hood County. So, yeah, there's a lot of differences. Like Somerville County doesn't compare to us in any way, shape, or form. And Erath County, they have Stephenville, Dublin, and then they got a rural countryside. And so, yeah, there isn't any other county that compares to us. So, I definitely have a lot of things I want to talk about whenever you guys are ready to talk about it.
Well, that's what I was saying, like you have to cover an incident at Crescent, go all the way up to Toller, all the way to Lipan, and then closer into Stockton Bend or whatever, because these entities do not have their own police department. And that's why we were trying to get you new vehicles and new radios to be able to take into consideration and provide protection to all these citizens throughout the whole county, which I think we have, if I correct?
The board has done an outstanding job in helping us to move forward with technology and everything, so I don't have any problems with that, but it seems like we're always still trying to play catch-up on just having enough people to take care of all the citizens of this county that are out there now, out in the county, so that's we're always a little bit behind.
So as far as like a position, again, just throwing out a position, like say the district clerk's office. All right, based off what we were looking at up there, say comparing Pitt County to Parker County, right? I know that y'all got to talk to each individual person about kind of what it is, looking at job description, what you do. I know job descriptions, an outline, it doesn't really specify But talking about, like, say, the district clerk's office, all the different responsibilities they may have here versus another county, how do y'all take that into consideration as far as the amount of work that department may be doing?
Sure, so again, that ties into why we took into consideration multiple facets. So numbers are just kind of one thing to consider. So just because you have more doesn't mean you're all doing the same thing. Your odds are if there are more of you, you're more specialized. Whereas if there are less of you, you're more cross-trained to do everything in, for example, the district clerk's office. So again, that's why we kind of took an aggregate. And again, the numbers are just one aspect of it. There's definitely a little bit more to be told, and as I mentioned in the recommendations, that's why we say it's important to continue assessing because things change year by year. COVID has certainly turned a lot of things on its head in terms of what's required and what is needed.
I've got one. In your market summary, you make a statement saying that having employees in the same classification assigned to different pay grades ranges is not considered a good practice. Kind of expand on that and where you're going with that on what we're doing now and what should we do. So.
Yes, absolutely. So part of the reason that there is a pay plan in place is just to have some uniformity in how salaries are administered. So something that we noticed from the beginning was that we might have a clerk or different clerks, but those clerks are assigned to very different pay grades, and they have the same title of clerk. That can lead to some confusion for where should their salaries be moving forward. We also know that, employees can kind of talk amongst themselves, and that can be a little disheartening to find out that you're in a lower pay grade, but you do the same things, you have the same title. It's very confusing and certainly not something that is seen very frequently in the field, and it's not something we recommend. So that's why when we designed the new pay plan and have those pay grade classifications, we wanted to make sure that if you are a clerk, you're in the same pay grade. Now, if you are, say, a clerk 2 or an administrative clerk, you're likewise going to be in the same grade regardless of which department you are in. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I know in the report you recognize that we've got some classifications that need to be changed to more reflect what their job does. And
yes, and that was probably maybe part of what happened to begin with. So you had clerks, but they weren't all doing the exact same level of clerk things.
Right.
So that was also important for the classification piece to say, all the clerks doing similar things are going to have this title versus this other clerk title versus this other clerk title. And that way they all have one pay grade associated with that one clerk title.
Okay.
So was that on the kind of proposed plan that y'all came up with on the open range plan? Kind of what you're talking about, say with the clerk, they would then be able to, because they may fall in that category, you're able to, maybe this one does a little bit more, you're able to have them in the same category, but pay one a little bit more because they're within that range. Is that what that really goes back to?
Yes, so when we're talking about things like, you're probably touching on like merit increases or performance-based increases, what's nice about the open range plan is that you're not committed to, say, a 2.5% or 3% like you are in a step plan. Once you design your step plan, you're committed to increase by that percent. So say you have a really outstanding employee and you would like to reward them with a little bit more. You have the flexibility to give them, say, a 3% as opposed to a 2%. Likewise, and this is something we found in the previous recession of '08, is that if you have a budget year where times are a little bit hard and you can't give a 2.5%, you can still give employees maybe a 1%, which isn't as much as a 2%, but still something to keep salaries progressing. So that's what also is nice about the open range plan, is you can give some little adjustments if the budget doesn't allow for larger ones. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Let's go to the next part. I got a lot of questions, but, you know, I think what we're gonna have to do is gonna take a lot of work with the commissioners and the auditor, with Melissa, and going through what we actually have within each department, and then talking to each department head. You've given us a lot of really great data here that we're going to be able to use, and it's going to be really helpful, which is what we all wanted to know to begin with. And then working with you, Melissa, and with the department head, is finding out exactly what these clerks are. I know that we have, maybe in some departments, they have maybe 10 or 11 10 or 11 employees, and 8 of them may be called clerks, but their duties are vastly different, and we need to just talk to them and maybe, like you said, give them a new heading or title besides clerk. You know, clerk / something else, I guess.
We did come up with some proposals in the staffing report, so that can,
Yeah.
or sorry, in the compensation report, where we might have clarified maybe like a jail clerk, administrative clerk, or broke out administrative assistant, office manager a little bit more clearly.
So that somebody that is doing a lot more than just inputting some information, if they're administering something else, they should be receiving more. If you do more within certain prescribed limits, you should receive more, and you should be compensated for that.
And that's what Evergreen did provide, was a good recommendation, a good base to get started moving forward. And yes, that is something that will just have to be considered during the budget workshops in 2021. And of course, we know how that process works, so this is definitely just a good base for us to move forward.
I agree. You agree with that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying too. Ms. Kidd, you agree with that?
We'll be working hard on it.
Just finished one, now we'll start again, won't we?
Never ends.
That's why it's a cycle, right?
Okay.
Cycle of life.
All right, let's go to the next part then, okay?
Okay, well, those were the 2 studies, I guess, unless you want to dive into more specific questions.
I don't think we have any more specific questions.
No, I think the report kind of speaks for itself a
Yeah.
little bit. If everybody, we just need to work with it and see if we can't stay within the boundaries of what they've come up with. And they've come up with some good suggestions and pointed out some inequities. They're there. We're going to have to deal with them. We'll do that during the budget process. We probably won't be making any decisions today. Matter of fact, we don't even have a quorum, but that's okay. But I think this study will be used. When we get down to our budget hearings and we hear from the departments, we'll be using this to kind of help us get through that process and maybe, I don't want to say clean up the inequities, but try to make the compensation more equitable. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from, Judge.
I agree. We got meetings going on all the time. The sheriff and I were just at another meeting. That's why I was running a few minutes late on the COVID situation with our other, what was that called? What was that meeting that we just got out of at EOC? Was it?
Local Emergency Planning Committee.
That's right, local emergency planning. I don't even know the
Oh, boy.
acronyms anymore, but we had everybody from the nuclear plant to Wook Hollow and the Forest Service and everybody else involved. So we've got a lot of moving parts here in this county, that's for sure. So I think this is a good report, though. I think this is something that we needed for a long time. I know that Commissioner Deaver, who's out ill right now with COVID, was really big on getting this report done. And I know that Commissioner Cotton and myself and Commissioner Eagle and Commissioner White will also be big on getting.
And 2 more new ones coming in here in about another 2 months that I think this will be a big help for them too, to help us get through the next budget process.
And I would like to say this to all the constituents here in Hood County, is that the 2 newly elected commissioners have been here for all the meetings and special meetings like this. So Commissioner Andrews, Commissioner Jack Wilson. I mean, y'all have been here, so y'all be able to hit the ground running on January 1, 2021, right after you get sworn in. You just turn around and hit all of them. That's good, so. Good. Okay.
I appreciate everyone coming today. This was good for everyone to hear.
Well, this is going to give us really something to work at. We've talked about this, and I know how we worked within the budget last year, and we could have really needed this. We didn't quite get it on time because of
Well,
what.
our budget last year was not our typical budget, so we pretty much knew by midsummer that we were just going to have to do what we had to do to survive as a county. And like I said, maybe next year we can address this a little more and use it as a guide to move forward.
That's right. Well, I'm really proud with everybody here in Hood County. Everybody really, I think they're working even better together, even under these adverse conditions. Everybody realizes they are adverse, and I think we are working closer together, hopefully. So, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
We'll probably be calling you up and asking questions. You will be very fair with your rate when we ask you questions, am I right?
I always use the data.
They have been great to work with, I must say.
Okay.
Her and Nancy have just been awesome and very helpful.
Even if they're all the way from Tallahassee,
That's right.
Florida. That's good. Y'all work well here. This is great. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll adjourn.